Hello and welcome to the Bob Reeves Brass live Facebook stream. My name is John Snell. I'll be your host for this episode. So great to have you here. I hope you're safe and healthy wherever you are in these crazy times. So, our special guest today for this live Q&A is Noah Gladstone. Noah is the founder of the Brass Arc, a equipment company that specializes in new, vintage, just about anything under the sun for trombone, some trumpet and other brass as well. He's also a great trombone player and a contractor and founder of Hollywood Scoring. So there's not a whole lot that Noah can't talk about. So feel free to leave us your comments. We'll be featuring some of those in this live broadcast. Show us some love, and we're going to start off by bringing Noah in here. Noah, thanks for joining us.
Hey, John, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Even better having you here. Let's talk.
Well, you're looking fantastic, I must say.
Thank you. Not bad for a Friday, right?
Not bad for a Friday. Absolutely.
We have a few questions that were submitted in advance from Instagram and some other places, so we'll start with those. But feel free,
Sure.
If you're watching, first let us know around the world where you're watching from in the comment section. But like I mentioned, feel free to ask Noah anything, and we'll feature your questions live. So the first question, as a trumpet player, I have no idea what this means. TIS. What does that mean for trombone? And what are your thoughts on that? Which one is better? Which one is worse?
Sure. Well, TIS is a really interesting thing. It's kind of a mysterious mystique about trombones that are made with TIS. TIS stands for, of course, tuning in the slide, which means that our tuning slide is in the slide. Of course, the whole trombone is a tuning slide, but instead of having the adjustment in the bell section, which is like how most trombones are made, the tuning slide is in a mechanism that extends the length of the slide tubes, meaning that you can extend the cylindrical tubing as opposed to a part of the trombone that's supposed to be a tapered tube. So on old trombones, especially from some of the makers from Conn back in the day, they featured a lot of tuning in the slide models. They ultimately kind of were phased out as some people preferred the ergonomics and just the weight distribution of having the extra hardware back behind them rather than in the slide, making the instrument a little bit front heavy. But there's some really interesting sonic qualities about tuning in the slide trombones. Of course, having the J bend, which is basically where the traditional tuning slide would be, having that being a full, complete taper leading into the bell, kind of like the first branch of most instruments, having that being a continuous taper really helps with a lot of the intonation issues that you find, especially on larger bore instruments. So that's one advantage to a tuning in the slide trombone. Another advantage is that you get a lot more resonance, I find, in tuning in the slide trombones. It's a fun feedback on your chops. You can get some really lyrical, beautiful sounds, I think. So I have a lot of tuning in the slide instruments myself. I prefer tuning in the slide bass trombones like the Conn 62H, which is one of my favorites. The Fuchs bass trombone, which of course is working on a project with Marcus Leuchter, which features tuning in the slide. But they also work really well on tenor trombones. I have some tenors with tuning in the slide. I have some vintage Conns from and even a new M&W trombone at the shop right now, which has a tuning in the slide tenor trombone that's just fantastic. So, people that are looking to be a little bit different might want to investigate tuning in the slide instruments. I'm fielding more questions these days about that style trombone than I have in the past, which is cool. I think a lot of people are kind of coming around to it. A lot of the modern technology and manufacturing techniques kind of mitigate some of the weight from the slides so that the slides aren't quite so clunky as they used to be 100 years ago. But there are really some viable options. Of course, I mentioned Greenhoe makes a tuning in the slide models. M&W trombones in Wisconsin make fabulous tuning in the slide models. Canstol offered some for a while they were still in business. Mm-hmm. And Shires does a tuning in the slide alto trombone that's really fantastic. So Michael Rath also. So there's a lot of the custom makers will do a tuning in the slide instrument for you if requested. Of course, you're going to pay a little bit extra money for that because there's a bit more work involved in making a tunable J and bending that in the right taper. So it's a little bit more work going, but it's cool. Some really fun stuff coming out these days for tuning in the slide trombones.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we got Ireland and Arlington, Texas. So cool already.
Awesome.
People all the
Cool.
way around the world
Love
joining
it.
in. So yeah, be sure
Love it.
to leave us your questions and comments. We can feature them live here on this broadcast. Here's a new one. Thomas is asking, what would you recommend to widen a modern Con 62H slide?
Widen a modern Con 62H slide. Wow. Well, there's quite a bit of intricate detail to do that. I mean, the Con trombones all feature a narrower slide than, say like a Bach 42 width or others. The first thing you need to do is you need to find a competent tech that's experienced in rebuilding slides, because basically you have to go to scratch for that. What involved, you would need to find someone to make you a custom slide bow crook in the correct bore size to work, and the correct width, and then you need to modify your hand grips. Basically, here I have a trombone sitting here. You'd need to expand the tube in the middle of these, or have new parts made to widen the slide, and then you'd have to have that all built back together and polished and all those things. So it's certainly doable. People often email me and ask, what kind of they want to do mods like this, and anything is possible, but it takes time and effort and money, and not everybody wants to spend that money, and also, I've done my fair share of modifying my own horns and stuff like that. It doesn't always work out as you expect it to work out. So, be willing to, I wouldn't say to cut up your favorite slide, maybe foray into getting a backup slide and modifying that first before you just, take the torch to it. But, to each their own, your mileage may vary. So.
Awesome advice. And let's go back to the beginning. How did you start collecting?
Sure. Well, I started playing trombone when I was in the 6th grade. I actually wanted to play the cello first, and I was living in Florida at the time. I was born in Miami. I was living in Florida at the time. Not a lot of classical music there back in the 80s, so much in the schools at least. And I wanted to play the cello. I was always fascinated with music. I used to watch PBS broadcasts when I was 4 or 5 years old of operas, and my parents would be like, my parents are not musicians. My mother's a teacher. My father is an animator. So definitely some artistic background there, but as far as direct music training for myself, I didn't have any, but I was drawn to classical music really early, and jazz, things like that. I used to watch all those PBS broadcasts back in the day when there was only, you had your rabbit ears on your TV, and I would stay up late, and there was no video on demand or anything like that. I would stay up late and watch the opera broadcast. So I wanted to play an instrument, and they offered a beginning strings program at my school, and I was the first to sign up. I was so excited. I wanted to play the cello. Obviously, lower instruments had spoken to me, and I really wanted to play the cello so badly. And they wouldn't let me. They said, no, you got to learn on a violin. And I didn't want to play the violin. I hated the violin. I didn't want to play a violin at all. I had one for a week, and I was like, ew, this is awful. So I was devastated. And when I started 6th grade, I was able to join the beginning band, and I walked in. I remember, I'll never forget it. And I was like, the trombone looks like so much fun. It just called to me. And it turned out my uncle had held a trombone when he was in high school, as part of a dummy act, I guess. When his marching band, he would throw the trombone up in the air and pretend like he was getting shot. And he had this old trombone. It was an old Blessing Standard. I remember he shipped it to us, all just beat to heck. And but I had my own instrument, and I was so excited. And I progressed pretty well for being self-taught. Was really into practicing. I really liked playing it. And when we moved out to California, I was lucky enough to meet Byron Peebles.
Byron, yeah.
Who was the associate principal in the LA Philharmonic, and he lived very close to my house actually. So we really hit it off, and he was a major instrument collector. I'll never forget my first lesson with him. I walked in, and there was just a wall of trombones on stands, Bach Mount Vernons, vintage Cons, just all the stuff that I was so into. I just got in, I was collecting at that point.
You were hooked.
I was hooked. 300 mouthpieces. We would spend half our lesson measuring mouthpieces with calipers, and looking at this instrument and trying this one. And I remember I had a Getson Custom at the time, which was like an Edwards basically, which were a Thayer valve. That was a huge deal. Like this was the trombone to have. And got some damage at school. At school, someone tripped and put some dents in it, so I had to take it to Rob Stewart. And Rob Stewart, if you know who Rob Stewart is, arguably one of the best brass technicians in the world, certainly maybe of the last 100 years. Amazing resource and craftsman. I went over there, and you can't just show up to Rob's place and drop off your instrument. You have to make an appointment. No. And so it was like 2 weeks I was going to be without a horn. So I remember Byron loaned me a vintage Con 88H that Larry Minnick had put together. He was like, "Oh yeah, here, take this one and play on it." And I was just like, "Oh my God, this is it. This is the sound that I have in my head." And I was hooked on vintage instruments after that. I never played a modern. Well, I mean, I have modern instruments, but I haven't played a new instrument since then. Either stuff that I built myself or vintage stuff from my collection. And it just kind of snowballed. I started collecting and got mouthpieces and horns, and now I have 70 trombones. Maybe, I don't know.
Woo!
It's crazy. It's crazy. Every size and shape, and it's nuts, but it's fun. It's my hobby. So
awesome.
There you go. I'm rambling now.
No. I mean, we're getting geeky. We're talking live with Noah Gladstone of the Brass Arc, Hollywood Scoring, which we'll get into in a little bit, and professional trombone player. Noah, you do so much. Just checking the comments, we got Ishii-san from Japan commenting. Cool. So we're spanning all the way from Ireland to Japan. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments, because we can feature your question live here with Noah, and let us know where you're watching from. It's exciting for us to see where you're viewing us from around the world, even if it's down the street. So let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about our project, huh? The
Sure.
Trombone
Sure.
Corner. Talk about how we started that, what it is, and let's get into that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. Well, you've obviously had the Other Side of the Bell podcast for a while now, and I think you guys are up to 90 interviews or something like that, right?
Getting there.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's really something, and I know that's a great resource for trumpet players from all over the world. They love listening to that podcast, talking to all sorts of people. So, we've obviously been working together on our mouthpiece project for the past 5 years, I think, almost, something like that now. Mm-hmm. We were just hanging out at the shop, and you're like, "Hey, why don't we start a trombone podcast?" Cool, let's do it. So we decided to call it the Trombone Corner, which had been kind of a running gag for my buddies at the studio, Hollywood Scoring. I have lots of instruments, and they tend to land everywhere, including in a corner of the studio. And we actually made a drawing on the wall that says the Trombone Corner, and there was, at any given time, 5 to 30 trombones in that room at the studio. So, it kind of made sense that we would call our podcast the Trombone Corner when we were coming up with names for it. And it's been really fun. We did our first 2 episodes with David Rejano and Martin Skippers while they were at the shop working on some mouthpiece stuff with us, because David has a signature line, and we were coming out with another signature line for Martin, which is really exciting, which I'll talk about in a bit, because I think there's some mouthpieces there that aren't really, for specific kinds of players that I think are not being well served right now in the mouthpiece market. So that's really exciting. But and then we had COVID start, and we've had to do all these interviews remotely, which has been interesting and challenging, but a lot of fun. We just posted Jay Friedman. Obviously, I've known Jay for years. I've studied with him. He's an absolute mentor and a dear, dear friend, and I respect him so much. He's such an inspiration. So logically, I wanted to have Jay early on in our podcast, and it's a really fascinating interview. It's up right now. It's over an hour. Just all sorts of tidbits and advice and funny things you may not know about Jay, and all sorts of great stuff. So it's really cool to showcase that. Coming up, we have some great interviews. Ralph Sauer, of course, everybody knows Ralph, principal of the LA Phil. Another one of my teachers, Bob Sanders, great studio-based trombone player.
That was a fun one. Yeah.
Really fun.
Yeah.
Bob is just so knowledgeable, and he struggled with some focal dystonia and then came back from that, and it's really a fascinating interview. So, we're trying to present some new perspective from different players, in different kinds of careers and ways to make a living as a trombone player.
Yeah, and
We have Aubrey Logan, coming up, which is another one. She's primarily a singer and plays trombone, but she travels around the world. So fascinating to talk to her. That was a really enjoyable interview.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. And doing the trumpet ones, just everyone has their own journey. Everyone has a different take on music, on playing. Some people practice rigidly, some people don't practice at all, but it all comes down to the music. And I mean, we're only a few podcasts in, and that's already evident. Even just with the symphony players. So it's been a
absolutely
fun project. So yeah, you can find that. It's on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, just about anywhere you can download, or apps, that sort of thing, where you can get your podcast. TromboneCorner.com. You go straight to where you can listen online. I think it's on Brass Arc, it's on Bob Reeves, so very hard to miss. So man, we got great comments coming in. A couple folks from Germany, Cincinnati, Northridge, right down the street practically. So thank you all for joining us. We're here with Noah Gladstone, and we're talking trombone, we're talking equipment, we're talking music business. Ask us questions, show us some love in the comments, and if you want something, you want to know something from Noah, put it in the comments and we'll ask live. Let's talk a little bit about the music business. How did you get started in contracting and in studio work?
Sure, real interesting. So I was at USC doing my trombone performance degree. My undergrad and both my masters were done at USC, studying with Terry Cravens. Shout out to Terry Cravens.
Mm-hmm. Fight on.
Great guy, great fight on. And USC's got a really interesting dynamic with the film school there. They have a really great film school, and they also offer a scoring program that they had just started when I was there. They just very, very new program. It's pretty prestigious now. They've been doing it for 10, 15 years, more than that, I guess. But they would have these film composers come in and basically work with the filmmaking school on doing short films and student films and festival films and stuff like that. I was at a party one night, and I've always been a sociable fellow, and I know a lot of musicians, and as trombone players tend to be, we have a lot of time to sit around and think about things. So I happen to be pretty good at business and pretty good at communicating with people. So a composer was waiting in line to while we were waiting in line at the bathroom, and we just started talking, and he said, "Hey, I have a project I need some musicians for." I said, "Well, I can help you with that." So it was one of those old Coca-Cola short subjects. They used to play those in the previews. Students would do a competition. You would do like an animation or something, 30 seconds, and then Coke would give you a stipend, and then they would own it and put it up in front of previews and stuff for their Coke brand. Mm-hmm. So it was one of those. Very little money, but he needed some players. So put it together. Went great. It was a 1-hour session. And there was a fellow sitting on the couch who happened to be this composer's orchestrator. His name was Michael Berry. Michael Berry calls me the next day. He says, "Hey, I like your style. My friend is doing the music for a movie featuring one of the actors from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and we have a budget and we need an orchestra. Can you contract this?" Sure.
Don't say no to that. Don't say no.
You never say no. You say yes. I had no idea what I was doing, but
I can do that.
I built out a budget. I booked the studio. I hired the engineer. I took care of music prep. I handled all the musicians hiring, all through the union, all union. Contracted my first motion picture when I was 22 years old. Union motion picture. And at that point, I had skin in the game, and I was like, I'm pretty good at this. I'm pretty good at organizing. I'm pretty good getting this all together. It all came down. My budget was right on the dollar. People were impressed. At the time, there was only a handful of contractors in town. I was by far the youngest, and still am. And it was cool. I was like, no one's really doing this my age. Like, this maybe is an important skill to have, especially for musicians. I think it's an important role. It's an overlooked role. Personnel managing and just being that, and I hate to use a cuss word, but a shit screen between management and players. So that's kind of how I got into contracting, and I built up my credits through the years. Around 2007, a buddy of mine, Greg Curtis, was a trumpet player. We were playing in brass quintet at the time. I think, John, you played with us a few times.
Oh yeah, I love Greg.
And and we were playing in a brass quintet, and Greg was helping out engineering for some of these sessions. He had a little studio at his house, and he wanted to build a scoring stage, or a studio at the time, a rock and roll studio. And we were talking, and we're like, rock and roll studios, people aren't doing records like that anymore. They're not really going to studios. They're doing them at their house, or they're not, they're booking the label will rent someone a house for 6 months and bring all the gear in, and that's what they'll do at record. So people aren't really booking studios so much anymore for that. So around the same time, 3 major scoring studios in Los Angeles all closed, and there was a fire sale of specialized scoring equipment. And so Greg and I, he hired me to project manage. He decided to build a scoring studio from the ground up, called the Bridge Recording, which is very popular here in LA, very successful. Greg has since sold it and semi-retired and is just doing mixing, freelance mixing now. Mm-hmm. So look him up if you need an engineer. But it was a really popular studio. People loved it. Really, really great. And it was a great experience for me to project manage and build a recording studio from scratch. I learned an awful lot. By the time that finished, I had to decide if I wanted to stay in the studio business or if I wanted to be a contractor and a player. And I decided to pursue contracting and playing as my main avenue. And the Brass Arc was founded around then just because I had all of these instruments at my house. Of course, people know me because I was working at Steve Ferguson's shop for years at the Horn Guys. I started that business with Steve in his house. Well, Steve started it and hired me as the first employee. So we built that together. So I learned a lot about just the music retail business and stuff like that.
I have to jump
all of those things. Yeah,
I have to jump in right there because we have some of the folks watching. We have Simon from Norway, who bought his current trombone from you 5 years ago and loves it.
Cool. Thanks, Simon.
We got Mary Carmen, who's with Stomvi in Spain. She's watching in Valencia,
awesome.
Spain.
Hi.
Mark Miller popped in, and Edward Solomon bought my Elkhart Con 62H from Noah several years ago and never looked back. So can't go anywhere without someone who's playing a trombone that's been through the Brass Arc.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing phenomenon, and obviously I love the connections that I make with people through this business. It's one of the reasons why I keep doing it, because this is not my main source of income, and my main job is being a producer and through Hollywood Scoring and playing the instrument. But I love doing the Brass Arc just because I can facilitate things for people and make them happy. I love the Mouthpiece project and all these little projects because at the end of it, I'm just a super nerdy trombone player. So I really, things that make me excited, I know that there's other people out there that get excited about it too, and I like facilitating for people. So it's a real fun thing. Even at 2-3 in the morning when I'm back packing the boxes for all of you, lose sight. Yeah, I never lose sight that. Yeah,
taking it down to the train station or the bus station, right?
Oh man, well, train station, not so much.
Not so much. I interrupted you. You were getting to how you formed Hollywood Scoring. So would you pick up from where you left off on that?
Sure. I'll jump back in there. So. Fast forward around 2011, my friend Michael Berry, who was the person that is responsible for me getting into contracting, calls me up and says that he's starting a sample company called Cinesamples with Michael Patty, who was another friend of mine from college, another great composer, and they wanted me to contract a brass library for them. So I helped out with that. We did a union brass library called Cinebrass, which if you're a film composer, you're extremely familiar with Cinesamples because it's one of the top tier sample companies in the world. And Cinebrass is still widely used today. I'm very proud that all of the musicians partake in royalties from Cinesamples. They've paid out over $1 million in royalties to the musicians that have recorded on their sample libraries. I believe they are one of the only, if not the only, sample companies that actually pay royalties to musicians. So they're great dudes. After we finished Cinebrass, it went really well. They were like, "What do you want to do now? We love working with you. You're a bro. We've known each other for a long time. What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, let's start a music production company. That sounds like fun. I've always wanted to do it. I'm super keen on the old studio system. I always was fascinated by the idea of having, on salary orchestras and studio owned writers and composers and orchestrators, a one-stop music department. The idea of a whole music department, like especially, Alfred Newman and what they've done at, the Newman family at Fox, always really fascinated me. So I was like, well, let's try to build something like that. I don't know if it's possible, but that's my dream and that's my idea. So we invested a lot of money and we did a video at Sony where we had a 100-piece orchestra come and we recorded, I think it was 9 songs, 9 little cues, all different styles that we wrote in-house, recorded them in 3 hours, and then broadcasted out. We were experimenting with remote streaming. At the time, people were going to Prague and still are doing remote sessions around the world. We were like, hey, no one's really doing this in LA. What if someone wants to record, from overseas and record in Los Angeles? How cool would that be to offer that kind of service? So we made a big investment. We did that. We made a website. And right out of the chute, I got an email from a company called Riot Games, who was just starting a game called League of Legends, and needed some help with their music department. So we went down and had a meeting, and that was born our long-term collaboration with Riot Games. And since then, Hollywood Scoring has supported them from about 2012 until currently, still are supporting their music department with live recordings and compositions, orchestration. Basically, we act as another wing. It's one of the reasons why I get to travel around the world. We do all their esports broadcasts. So I've been around the world doing stadium events and managing broadcasts, worldwide broadcasts with 45 million people on streams, stuff like that. So it's become a much more technical side to the business, but a lot of fun. 2 years ago, we got into our own recording studio finally, which has been a major dream of mine. It's over in Atwater Village, which is kind of near Griffith Park for people that know Los Angeles. And we have a facility there that can hold about 50 players. We do rehearsals there for live concerts that for orchestras that I manage. Hollywood Chamber Orchestra is one that I run with my buddy Mark Robertson. But other orchestras that I manage and that rent the space come and rehearse there. We've had 95 people in the studio, so it's a pretty big studio. But recording-wise, we try to keep it around 45. Right now, we're currently closed because of COVID, but we have been doing actually a lot of remote recording for people, helping support musicians with remote rigs that we go and set up at their house, supplying them with microphones, remote recording and engineering, like getting in and setting up their Pro Tools IOs and all sorts of stuff, which has been really fun and challenging to kind of solve those problems. And then we're working on broadcast solutions from our studio where we're going to be able to hopefully get back with small ensembles and retain some sort of workflow with bidirectional communication and streaming and broadcasting from our studio. So it's a lot of fun. That takes up most of my day, just managing that. And, especially these days, I'm on a lot of conference calls. So shout out to DPA microphones. They hooked me up with this. I use this for all my conference calls and stuff. So hopefully I sound nice and clear. But I mean that's kind of a Hollywood Scoring in a nutshell. A lot of people don't know that because they only know me from the Brass Arc. But they don't know that I'm a full-time music producer and doing all that stuff. So
in a lot of our social media pictures, you are wearing a Hollywood Scoring, jacket, or you get that in there. You're sneaky about that. This is amazing.
Any opportunity for some cross pollination, of course.
And and some news. We've almost hit 45 million live streams with this, so we're getting pretty close to your League of Legends final.
Oh, man.
Right here on Bob Reeves Brass. We have Susan.
We'll be introducing some AR stuff pretty soon, floating mouthpieces and things pretty soon. So
this is so cool. We have Susan from Paradise, Newfoundland, up in Canada. We got Noel Stevenson from Brisbane, Australia. Oh man, I wished we were there.
Noel, what's up?
Well, we got Brass music specialist down there. We visited him a few years ago, and what a great area. Beautiful in Brisbane. So greetings, good eye, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to say? Now look, I mean, we're all coming together because of the COVID, so I think we can ask this question. It is from a UCLA student via Tennessee. Any chance of getting a full line of small shank mouthpieces in the Brass Arc Bob Reeves mouthpiece line?
A full set. Well, that is something we'd like to do eventually. One thing that we're excited about is hopefully relaunching the Proviance line of mouthpieces.
Hmm.
Of course, we have all the tools at the shop. We need to revisit them a little bit, but we do have the capacity to do that, and hopefully that's something that you and I will investigate this year. Kind of work on that project. Of course, those are very specific types of mouthpieces. As people that know Proviance mouthpieces, it's an old classic size, but he made a variety of sizes, all small shanks pretty much. I think that's some really valuable, vintage gear that we can kind of polish up and bring back to market. So that's a project that we keep talking about, and hopefully this year we'll get to it.
Yeah.
As far as other Brass Arc Reeves collaborations on small shanks, I would like to do a 7C at some point, and maybe a 12C mouthpiece. I think between that and the 11C and the 6.5 Clark that we already make, that's pretty much all the small shank stuff you want. Of course, we can do custom sizes now. So if there was something particular you wanted, like a weird bass trombone rim on a small shank mouthpiece, it's certainly possible. But
we can do it.
Don't know that I would absolutely recommend it, but it's it is possible to do. So
well, and
hopefully that answers the question.
That's the thing in developing our mouthpiece line is, I mean, there's mouthpiece makers that mass produce things and they can make every size from the smallest to the largest, and everything we make is handmade, and so we were really selective about what models we made because we wanted to fill a niche in the mouthpiece line that was either lacking, or find the real popular model and improve on it, and then because we do custom stuff, we can fill in the cracks if need be. I think that's
absolutely. So if there's something that you're looking for specifically, email us and we can tell you sure, we'll do it. I think it's not a great idea, or here's what I think maybe will happen before you decide to spend a lot of money on a custom mouthpiece. But we're happy to do it for you and work with you on that. But putting large rims on small cups just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. So there is that.
Next one, Mark Miller. Hey, Mark, how you doing, buddy? What sort of organizational tools do you use to keep track of everything that you do?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. Sometimes, for the contracting and producing stuff, I'll just talk about that real fast because I actually worked with a friend of mine recently to build some really cool contracting software that I helped him design the workflow. It's called Rhapsody. And it's really cool. It allows me to manage calls, work calls, and keep my databases organized and do my payrolls and all that stuff, all within like a really slick interface visually with graphs and tracking things time-stamped. Allows me to manage multiple projects at the same time. There may be any given time where I may have between 15 and 30 concerts, recording sessions, mixing sessions, all of those things going on at the same time. So that software has been invaluable as far as just keeping things organized and making sure people are paid. No one falls through the cracks. I used to do it all in Excel, and things will inevitably fall through. It's just you're human and you make mistakes. So that's been an invaluable thing that I've been using the last year. Some people, it's really cool. They get we're developing a mobile app. You get your work call right on your phone. You can track it. It goes right into your calendar. Communications both ways. It's really, really cool. Super secure. Everything's up on the cloud. So that's one way to do it. As far as like shop stuff, I'm really bad about that actually because I get so many emails a day that I try to keep up throughout the day, but inevitably some things fall through. And I have a thing on my website, like if I haven't written you back, please, take no offense. I probably just missed it or it got buried in the 300 emails that I have. So if I don't write back, write me again and say, hey, what's going on?
You don't have your call center handle all of that stuff for you?
No, it's just me. I have no employees at the Brass Arc. It is me, and I have a helper that comes and helps me pack, and that's it. So if you're getting an email back, it's from me. If you're getting a box, I packed it. So it's hard to keep track of all that stuff. I do my best. As far as like lead pipes and mouthpieces, I have a big spreadsheet, and I add those in on a software called Trello, which is really cool on my phone, and I can track orders and stuff that way. So that's pretty convenient. There's a lot of really cool apps and stuff out there for organization. I'll see what's out there, and a lot of it's helpful. As far as the contracting stuff goes, Rhapsody will be available to the public. So any other blossoming contractors out there that are interested in that software, you can check it out. It's pretty powerful stuff.
Awesome. Great advice, and look forward to seeing that. Thank you all for watching. Show us in the comments. Show us some love. Tell us where you're watching or viewing from around the world. We've got Japan, I know, Ireland, Australia, Canada, Cincinnati, Northridge, and Go See Sun. We got time for one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap up here. This is a good one, especially for young players. From Connor, what do you look for in players when you are contracting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, you have to be a good colleague. That's like number one. People need to be able to work with you easily, and you got to be a team player. Contractors are generally, obviously, you need to be able to play. Rule number one, if your first gig you show up and you're learning on the job, you're not going to be there very long. So you need to spend the time and have the patience to develop and hone your skills to be able to play a lot of different varieties of styles. Your sight reading needs to be impeccable. Everyone makes mistakes. That's fine. If you continue to struggle with sight reading, you're probably not going to be asked back. The studio scene, at least, I'll talk about studios and then live stuff. Studio scene is tough. It's a small community of people. People have been waiting and practicing to get those positions. There's not a lot of them. And they have relationships with composers. They have relationships with their section mates, and it's just a waiting game. I often advise young players to not be focused on getting into the recording studio right away. It is some of the most prestigious work there is to do. It is some of the most well-paid work there is to do. If you are there and you haven't paid your dues, people are not going to like that. So that's one thing. The other thing is the live work, and I think that's the best way to get into the studio work. Is you need to cultivate your, the live playing, get out there and be seen, try to take auditions and win auditions in your local orchestras, and be a great colleague. A lot of times, as a contractor, someone will recommend to me, oh, you should check out so-and-so, they're a really great player. That is a much more valuable thing than someone emailing me cold or on Facebook and says, hey, I'm new to town, here's my resume, check me out. Cool, I'll check you out, but I may not call you right away because I don't know you. We may end up on a job together, sitting next to each other on a gig. And absolutely I'm paying attention. So if you do really well, I'll be like, hey, I need someone to sub for me, I'm going to send you and see how you do. I will also test out a lot of younger players on live jobs, and then people will report back and say like, oh, that person was really great. You should absolutely keep them in your rotation. So, number one above everything, your reputation is everything. It will precede you. You have to be part of the musical community. You have to be a contributing member. There are lots of people that just show up and are super selfish and want to be making all the money and be doing all these gigs and all that stuff. It takes time. It takes time and patience to be, in that kind of world. The cream always rises to the top. If you're a great player, if you're a great person, if you get along with everybody and you're a valuable contributor to the team, there is no question that you'll make it. You have to have that faith that you're going to make it. But the other thing is there's a lot of other avenues and ways to make money in the music business other than just playing an instrument. There's management positions. There's grants writers. Those are extremely valuable music administration positions with all these nonprofit organizations. There's content creators. There's composers, orchestrators, music prep, engineers. There's so many other areas.
Podcasters
with a musical knowledge that empowers you to, find skills other places than just sitting in the back row of an orchestra. you shouldn't discount those. Those are all extremely valuable and important roles. Music supervisors, music clearance, music lawyers. I mean, there's so many valuable areas that are sometimes overlooked because everybody wants to be a performer. Sure, of course, performing, is great. It's thrilling. It's satisfying. But there's so many other satisfying ways to make a living in music too. So, that's what I would recommend to young players is, really broaden yourself. I mean, you can see how devastating this pandemic has been for live performance. It's just not going to happen for a while. And, a lot of musicians are finding themselves kind of like scratching their heads, like, what else can I do? For younger players coming up in college right now, I would be focusing on computer skills, on learning as much as you can about the music business, about, learning how to use software, Pro Tools, Logic, Digital Performer, learning how to do videos and edit videos, Final Cut, and all of those, those softwares, and familiarizing yourself with technology. How do you set up remote recording rigs and how to do all these things? That's a really valuable skill these days, and I don't think that's going to go away. So, if anything, that's going to be more prevalent after we emerge from this. So, that would be my advice to young players. Think outside the box. There's a great book I will never forget. Ralph Sauer. I was in a lesson with Ralph Sauer, and he was like, "There's a book that I always read. You should read it. It's called Think and Grow Rich. It's a famous book. If we're all sitting at home right now, go read that book. Think about outside the box. Find that white space and that someone's not really in yet, and try to carve that for yourself."
Well, and I think two of the things you mentioned, one, the waiting. I know a lot of our clients come in, move to town after college or after being on a cruise ship or something like that, and they think it's like a 6-month or a 1-year game. You play in a few rehearsal bands, you get to know some folks, and then you're sitting in the studio. And know from some of the guests that I've interviewed on the trumpet podcast, and some of like Bob Sanders and Al Kaplan that are coming up on the trombone podcast, it's not a 6-month or a year. I mean, it's maybe a 10 or 15-year game, working your way up. You have to, and those players all had day jobs and other jobs, computers or security guard. I mean, John Lewis famously was get up at 3 a.m. to deliver papers. He had a paper route while he was working professionally in town. So that's what it takes. And then the other thing, you talked about the breadth of knowledge and doing something in computers or something else in the industry that gets you into those circles.
Sure.
It gets you around musicians.
Absolutely.
It gets you in there, so you know who the players are, you know who the contractors are, and that's where you cultivate relationships that may then further your playing career. Maybe not.
About absolutely. Every job is a resume if you think about it. Like, no one's going to really look at a piece of paper and say, can this person play or not? No one really. They don't really care. Can you show up to the job? Can you get the job done? Are you a pleasant person to work with? Do you have a giant ego, or are you there to be part of the team? And, I think that's much more important, especially for brass players, because, it's such a close working relationship, as individual soloists working in sections, winds and brass, any kind of high stressful position like that, and it is going to be frustrating sometimes. And there will be times where it's not going to go your way and you're not going to get the break that you wanted. And it's how you deal with that. Do you throw in the towel? Do you keep persevering? Do you work at Starbucks and, get up at 3 and practice and try to better yourself and work on your goals? And I think the other thing that really should be talked about is, goals can change. Like, you never know what opportunity is going to give you. And, staying laser focused on one goal, I'm going to win that orchestra job, is kind of limiting yourself a bit. So, sure, maybe that's all you're destined to do and that's what you're going to do and you're going to keep doing it forever. And, yes, eventually you'll get an orchestra job. Will you be happy with that when you get it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, keep, but the nice thing is, like, music is really a powerful thing, especially right now in the world. I think people are really starving for music. I'm hoping when the world opens up again, people are going to be so hungry for live performance that, like, floodgates are going to open, and we're going to see a rebirth of live shows and orchestras, and that's my hope. I hope that happens for everybody.
Yeah. Well, Noah, it's been a fun. Oh, it's almost been an hour. It's gone by so fast.
Oh my goodness! Great.
Thank you so much for everyone who viewed and your great questions and showing us some love in the comments. This will be posted on Facebook afterwards, so you could go back and catch some of the great advice that Noah gave. Noah, can you tell the folks watching what's the best way to find you? Website,
Sure.
Social media, whatnot.
Sure. If you're interested more about the music production company and all the stuff that I do there, that's hollywoodscoring.com. My shop website, of course, is brassarc.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We have a Twitter account for Hollywood Scoring that we rarely ever use, but Facebook, Instagram, we do post up there quite a bit. And we're just actually redoing our website at Hollywood Scoring. It's going to be coming out in the next couple days, I think. So there should be some really fun stuff up there. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, noah@brassarc.com. And I will do my best to get back to you.
And if you don't hear back, resend the email.
You can send another email just in case.
Well, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, my friend. We'll have to do this again. Maybe you should have you on the Trombone Corner as a guest.
I'd love to be on the Trombone Corner.
I think we could find a few things to talk about.
I think so.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks, John. Be well.
Be safe, my friend.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for watching us. It's been an absolute honor to be here and have Noah. We hope wherever you are in the world that you're safe and healthy during these crazy times. A few things coming up. Next week we will have David Elton, the principal trumpet of the London Symphony Orchestra and the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. So he will be on here live for a Q&A. If you haven't checked it out already, he did a podcast interview on the other side of the bell, so be sure to check that out. Who else do we have coming up? Martin Skippers from the Royal Concertgebouw. He will be here next Thursday for a live Q&A. I'll check on the time and make sure. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those places, Bob Reeves Brass, so you don't miss any one of these. On the trumpet side of things, Bria Schoenberg, who's a wonderful jazz trumpet player and vocalist. She'll be featured on the podcast and a live Q&A. That'll be over on Instagram. And so make sure you follow us all those places so you don't miss out, because we have a lot of great content. Hey, we're not making mouthpieces. We're not doing valve alignments, so might as well be providing as much content and service to the brass community as possible. So thank you again so much. It meant a lot having all the viewers here chiming in and show us some love. So until next time, I'm John Snell. Be safe, be healthy.